was perusing the aisles of Hobby Lobby as I like to do when I'm trying to find inspiration for videos, and I came across this gallery glass in the stained glass area. I love trying new hobbies and exploring new mediums, so I picked up several things in this aisle for today's video, including some of the stained glass panels. For this first project, I just want to test out how this gallery glass stuff works. I'm only using the two brown colors here, and I didn't realize until later one is actually frosted. But I grabbed one of my Dollar Tree vases to see if this stuff would make it look like stained or colored glass, similar to how we color glass with dyed Mod Podge. I didn't really have a plan here, I just wanted to get a feel for the product and see how it dried down. Since I'm using two different color browns, I wanted there to be an asymmetrical line going around the vase. So I drew that out and started covering the vase with the gallery glass. At this point, I really wasn't sure how much product I should be using, and I didn't want to use too much. There were still sections you could see the glass underneath, so I got a palette knife and started to spread the paint and blend the line where the two colors meet. Then I worked my way around the vase. Once I covered the vase, I set it aside to dry. In my mind, this was going to look like a beautiful colored glass vase. Boy was I wrong. This thing looked like a gloopy mess. Not even remotely close to what I was envisioning. But the good thing about gallery glass is it will stay on the glass unless you want to remove it. You can simply take a razor blade and scrape it right off. So that's what I did. Good as new, it's like this mess never even happened. Gallery glass also sells leading, which in all honesty, after doing some research, is the same thing as puff paint. But this is what you can use to get those stained glass lead lines. Okay, we know this stuff doesn't level out like I thought it would. So this time I'm going to create a geometric design on top of the glass and fill in the different sections. This time when I fill it in, I'm using a few additional colors. I also took a needle to pop any bubbles that formed. Those bubbles will show up on your final project, so make sure you pop them. This version turned out so much better and I love it. The one thing I will note though, the color that was frosted had a much thinner consistency and ended up gathering up around the lead lines. That part could look better, but overall it turned out really cute. I found this cool texture pad for the gallery glass at Hobby Lobby and was actually inspired by the lantern they show on the package. I wanted to recreate something very similar to that. This one is pretty easy. All you do is cover the mat with the gallery glass in whatever color or colors you choose and set it aside to dry. I put a thin coat of the gallery glass on, and I think if I had made it a little bit thicker, this next part would have been easier. If you do decide to use two colors, you'll want to blend them out first. Once this stuff starts to dry, it will not blend correctly and start balling up on you. I also didn't think about the fact that the side we're seeing is actually going to be the back side once we peel it up. I did not do a good job blending the colors all the way down to the mat. I only worried about this surface that I could see, so make sure you go all the way down here. Now, this stuff isn't super expensive, but I did realize it smells an awful lot like Mod Podge. And it's made by Plaid, who also makes Mod Podge. I'd be willing to bet this is just colored Mod Podge put into a squeezy tube. So if you want to give any of these projects a try, you might be able to color up some Mod Podge and get the same result. Once the gallery glass dried, it was time to peel it off the mat. This was actually a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. In all fairness, it was sitting on my mat for a full week before I peeled it off. So that, mixed with the fact that it probably should have been thicker, wasn't working in my favor. I started to peel all along the edges and then worked my way in toward the center, carefully pulling. You don't want to pull too hard because it will stretch and then rip. Phew, I did it. Okay, that was seriously a workout and took about 20 minutes. Now all you have to do is apply it to whatever surface you want to have this texture. I'm using another one of these Dollar Tree vases. The full sheet could not have been more perfect to fit around this vase. I did have to tug at the edges slightly to make sure there was no gap in the back, but it was seriously the perfect size. I was even able to fold the top in and cover that lip. I didn't use anything to adhere the gallery glass, it clings right to the vase. And then if I want to remove it later on, I easily can. Now that I know how to work with this stuff, it's time for a more detailed project. I picked up a gallery glass blank, which is like plexiglass material. You also have to remove a film on both sides, and then you're left with this clear blank surface. I found a free printable stained glass pattern of a bird and printed that out. I will link this in my description box if you're interested, and this is what I'm going to use for my faux stained glass image. I taped the blank over top of the bird so that I can trace the image. I'm going to use the gallery glass leading again to outline the bird and add in his details. I thought there was a few too many lines on this bird, so I didn't add all of them on my version. But a tip I learned while doing some research on this project, you want the leading to look thick and three-dimensional on the surface. So you don't want to hold the tip of the nozzle directly on the surface. Instead, you want to start the line and then lift the nozzle off the surface a little and then drag your hand where you want the line to go and it will follow. I hope that makes sense. I tried to get a close-up for you to see. I know it's a little bit blurry, but if you hold the nozzle directly on the surface, you'll end up with a flatter and likely more shaky looking lead line. Now you want to let the lead lines dry before applying the colors. The next day I filled in the bird, and at first I was lightly filling in the shapes, not putting enough of the gallery glass paint down. I ended up having to add a second layer to the entire bird. So you want to make sure you're adding a good amount of the gallery glass or colored Mod Podge. You should not be able to see any glass through the paint. I also wasn't really making a pattern with the paint. You'll see here in a minute what I mean by that, but you want to make swirling motions with the nozzle to get that ripple-like texture of stained glass. I wanted there to be a little more detail on the branch, so I added the non-frosted brown first as my main color. And then I took my toothpick, dipped in the frosted brown, and added some detail lines to make it look like bark. I don't know how much you can see of this from far away, but up close it looks pretty cool. I let this dry before moving on to the background, and I'm using crystal clear to get that textured glass look. This time I realized I needed to create the texture as I was adding the paint. So I squeezed the tube and started moving my hand in a circular motion to get that look. My good friend Brandy over at the DIY Struggle recently did a Mod Podge swirl technique to get a faux stained glass look, and it looks very similar to the way this turns out. So like I said earlier, I'm pretty sure you can just use Mod Podge and save yourself some money. But you want to make sure you continue your swirls and your pattern going in the same direction all the way around the piece. I was kind of making ovals that were horizontal to my bird, and then I almost spun the glass and started making my swirls vertical to the bird. That would have looked funny in the end and would have been obvious that it's fake. I also tried not to make any area look too much like a pattern. If I thought it was starting to look too uniform, I went back over it with the nozzle and broke up that section. Alright, now I thought this looked a little bit plain left how it is. I had these Dollar Tree beaded wreath rings in my stash and thought that would be a really cute border around my bird. So I hot glued it down right on top. It was the perfect size. The only thing I don't love about the Dollar Tree wreath is how you can see that metal clasp right in the middle. So I made sure I glued it down with that part in the middle where I would hang it. Then I took some more Dollar Tree beads from a beaded garland and created a loop that covered up this metal clasp. What do you guys think of this technique? Would you give the faux stained glass look a try? This is just like an adult version of a sun catcher. Like I said at the beginning of this video, I really love to learn new hobbies and play around with new art ideas and techniques to share with you guys. I was so inspired by the stained glass aisle at Hobby Lobby that I picked up a few of the stained glass panels as well. I wanted to see if I could even figure out how to create a more simple stained glass project, and then I would love to create something a little bit more detailed as well. I've been doing a ton of research on stained glass art and I want to give it a shot. I hope you guys would be interested in seeing that because I'm super excited to make it. Stay tuned though, that true stained glass art will be coming in another video. But for today, I wanted to just see if I can get the hang of it. I found these beautiful air plant hangers from an Etsy seller and thought it looked relatively easy. In full disclosure, I'm going to show you my third attempt at this so I can explain what I was doing. I picked up this gray smoky glass panel and I already had the glass cutting supplies on hand from when I created this stunning lantern last year. But I measured out a 3-inch section and cut that down with the glass cutter and running pliers. I cut 2 panels just like this. Then I cut each of the 3-inch sections in half lengthwise, so I ended up with 4 3-inch by 6-inch pieces of glass. Next, I'm taking this copper foil. This is what you need in order to get the glass pieces to stick together. This copper foil comes with different color backings. Depending on the color you want the final soldering lines to be will determine what color you use. I'm using a black backed copper foil. The foil is like a tape and you apply it to the entire glass piece to cover all of the edges. Next, I cut out 2 little triangle pieces. This is going to be on the front and back of the plant hanger to create a little pocket. Like I said, this was my 3rd attempt, so I'm using one of my first 2 to get the shape I needed. Here are the pieces we have, and now it's time to assemble. I'm going to need to solder the pieces together using a soldering iron and solder. I'm using 60-40 solder, which I learned is favored for stained glass. You also need to apply liquid flux, which fuses the melted solder to the copper foil on the glass. Without the flux, the solder will not stick. You start out applying a generous amount of flux over the copper foil. You want to apply it where you're going to be joining 2 pieces together. Then take your iron, touch it to the solder. That solder is going to instantly melt to the iron, and then you can touch it to a section of the glass where you want the 2 pieces to meet. Let the solder fall onto the glass seam, and there you go. The pieces are joined together. I did this first to add both longer pieces to the triangle. Okay, now that my pieces are all attached, we can solder all the edges. This gives it that nice finished look. This also took some practice in getting it to look decent, and why I redid this project 3 times. I learned the flux is what makes all the difference here. You need to make sure there is a good amount of flux on the surface and reapply it if you need to go back over the solder line for a 2nd time. Once all the solder is on, I need to add a ring at the top to hang it with. Now, you should use a nickel-plated ring for it to stick, but all I could find was nickel-free. So I wrapped a small piece of that copper foil around it and applied the ring to the top of the plant hanger. Next, you want to wash the piece off really well to get all that flux residue off the glass. You can use a Dawn dish soap to do this. And last, I'm taking this black patina, which is why I used that black backed copper foil, and going to apply this all over the solder lines. This will instantly turn them black. It is so cool. I know this piece isn't perfect. My solder could use some work, but I am so proud of how this turned out. Now I can't wait to make a more detailed stained glass art piece in the future.